Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss where the Brexit talks are compared to the timetable, given that the British government still insist on forging ahead with them, but that businesses are increasingly panicking about the uncertainty. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, although I'm going to mostly concern myself with the EU negotiations, which I'm sure is what people would be expecting, it should be pointed out that Brexit requires us to form agreements with other countries as well. We have a few carry-over agreements, a very small number, with other nations, but these are carbon copies of what we had with the EU. Some of them are time limited and none of them are with the largest economies in the world, or our major trading partners. Switzerland is the closest one. Now, before this global pandemic struck, we'd already been told publicly by the most powerful economies, including the USA, which came as a surprise to some Brexiteers, that we were not at all a priority for trade talks. It was revealed that UK government lawyers were, well, they had to reveal that the government were in secret talks with at least one nation, but they didn't say who it was and they weren't compelled to say, which may or may not be the US. I did speculate about that. However, all face-to-face meetings will, of course, be definitely off. We may be holding some secret talks remotely. We don't know, but they can only go so far before they have to be made public. So now the only show in town really are the talks with the EU. They are the only ones that at least publicly we are holding. They are being held remotely, of course. And I talked about the most recent ones yesterday, where the only point to emerge was the issue of border checks. You know, given that border checks were agreed to last year, they shouldn't actually be forming part of the talks at all, let alone dominating them. Boris Johnson gave a commitment to carry out the necessary checks. They are now a matter of international and British law, passed by the Parliament in Westminster earlier this year. So actually, they form no part of the talks. So unless anything else was discussed at the talks in this week, I'm actually going to say there were no talks at all. There were discussions between UK officials, led by Michael Gove, and EU officials, but if they didn't discuss anything other than what had already been agreed, they've gone nowhere. And we you know, from what we've got from the public communiques, I can't see any evidence that anything was really discussed. So it's like they didn't happen at all. No work has started on complying with the measures for the border checks, which means, of course, the EU are keen to get an update on what's going on. Now, if Boris Johnson wants to come out and just say, do you know what? We've got a bit of a pandemic at the moment. It's not realistic to be able to complete the measures necessary to carry out these checks. That's fine. Seek an extension. No problem at all. The problem is that he's saying the opposite. He's saying that we're still going to be leaving at the end of this year, but we're not going to be ready for it. That's not really the sort of thing businesses want to hear. We're going to do this thing. We're not ready for it, and we're not going to be ready for it either. Yeah, no. And it is a real, issue for international credibility as well, just relationships between nations, because his lies might fool some of the British population when it comes to his obligations under international law. He's saying, oh, we don't need the checks at all. You know, a lot of the population will just go along with that. But it doesn't fool governments because, well, they know what the law says. We'll not get any fruitful talks with any nation if we don't comply with treaties that we sign. The problem is that all these lunatic Brexiteers, or the lunatic fringe of the Brexiteers, are going, oh yeah, stuff the EU, we don't need them. Even they are not saying we don't need the rest of the world, but we're not going to get the rest of the world on side if we are failing in our commitments. Because how could you trust us? Bear in mind that Boris Johnson is claiming the withdrawal agreement as his. He says it's his. So everything in it, he described as a great deal. So why isn't he going ahead with it then? But anyway, in terms of where we are now, the answer is actually literally nowhere. Nowhere. We've moved nowhere at all. Remember, by June, we were supposed to have various things agreed. It's not just by the end of the year. There were certain things along the way. We were supposed to have fishing rights sorted by June. Yes, it's not June yet, but we've gone nowhere with them. We were supposed to have various things regarding security and that's going nowhere. In fact, Boris Johnson keeps saying that we're pulling out of more and more systems of cooperation. So nothing of substance was discussed during the video conference this week. The Financial Times is pushing the need for an extension very hard. They're basically saying, look, everyone agrees we need an extension. Everyone in the EU says we need an extension. Everyone in the UK says we need an extension. Can we have an extension? They are pushing it really hard. Bearing in mind, the Financial Times is a newspaper that lobbies for the financial markets in the UK. So that gives you some idea of what investors want to see. The point being made by businesses as well is that while there is uncertainty, they cannot plan for investments. Now, of course, yes, the pandemic has thrown a huge spanner into anyone's plans in any country. But at least businesses know what other countries will be doing once we come through the other end of the crisis. Indeed, the EU have already been talking about the measures they may do alongside national governments to help businesses afterwards. So they're getting a little bit of clarity there. In this country, none at all. None at all. You know, they don't know what the market conditions are going to be like in the UK in 2021. What capacity will there be for international trade in goods and services? Because from what Boris Johnson seems to be going ahead with, not a lot. None at all for services, not a lot for goods. How easily will it be that we can get freight to come and go? Again, at the moment, not very easy. None of these questions are being answered, and so businesses can't plan for any investment in the UK without it being a massive gamble, because they literally don't know anything. So that is where we are compared with where we should be. The way I look at it is it's this simple. The government are not preparing for the no-deal Brexit. They are not preparing for the hard Brexit. That means we're not going to be ready for it. Now, if the government wanted a hard Brexit, if they actually meant it about leaving the transition period at the end of this year, they would be doing something to prepare for it. Whether it would be enough is another matter, but they'd be doing something. They're not doing anything. They've announced that they'll need to recruit many more border staff, more than you can actually recruit and train in 1 year anyway. But again, that's now going to be, well, I don't even know it's going ahead at the moment. If it is, it's going to go ahead very, very slowly. I suppose the only good side on that is there'll be plenty of people looking for a job in, for example, the border force. So they'll have a ready number of applicants. But where are we going with it? And we haven't got the physical infrastructure, so we haven't got anywhere for these new employees to work anyway, because we've not expanded the existing infrastructure. So no preparations for it, which heavily suggests that the government do not believe we're exiting at the end of this year with a hard Brexit. So they're going to have to extend. But I keep saying it, only half believing it, because common sense says they have to extend. But Boris Johnson isn't really into common sense. So there is always this mad dog syndrome potentially going on. But they will have to extend. Probably. So anyway, that's where we are. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.